Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. And we believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma. I'm a director at Softway, an agency based out of Houston, Texas, that specializes in digital transformation, culture, and branding. Each episode, we're diving into one element of business or strategy and testing our theory of love against it. And today's topic is love as a sales strategy. And I'm always excited when I get to do these episodes where we get to connect topics that feel naturally really disjointed, like love and sales. Like, what is the connection here? And I really want to unpack that today with my guest. I've assembled three of Softway's foremost experts in sales, and two of them you might recognize. We have Mohammed Anwar, our president and CEO. Hello, Mo.
Hey, Jeff.
And we have Chris Petrie, our VP.
Hello.
And I'm really excited to invite a new face to the show as well, Mr. Greg Duggan. Hello, Greg.
Hello, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Greg is our account services director. He hails from Australia, and he's been with Softway for the past 5 years, and he's spent his career working across a number of different industries. His background is in consulting clients, business strategy, and leading sales and marketing groups, and he's a huge valuable asset to the company as well, for sure. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining us.
Again, thanks for having me, mate.
Unfortunately, I will make you go first, though, on the icebreaker section. So, your question today is, if you had your own talk show, who would be your first guest?
Good question. That's a good one. You stumped me here, Jeff. That was not what I was expecting as the icebreaker.
Well, we'll let you think on it. I'll move on to Chris, and we'll come back to you. Chris, your question is
Beyonce.
All right, moving on to Mo. Just kidding. Chris, your question is, who would play you in a movie of your life?
Beyonce. What can't she do?
Was right.
It's like that would actually be an honor. I don't know.
I will come back to Chris as well. So, Mohammed.
I feel like I would want somebody who has not been featured in Hollywood to give a young Black actor a chance. So I'd say unnamed.
The next
big actor, young Black Hollywood, would be playing me. But I want somebody undiscovered.
Right. Mohammed, if you had to choose a ghostwriter to write a biography of your life, who would you choose to write it?
Go to Greg and come back to me later.
I would have two guests, Jeff. They'd be co-guests. You guys know me. I'm a huge sports fan, ultra competitive guy. I'm playing a lot of golf at the moment. As I'm getting older, it's about the only thing I can do. I'd have Tiger Woods. I'm really fascinated just with his story of being a child prodigy. His dad was his coach. He learned a lot of lessons, and then now, you're starting to see a lot of him coaching his kid. He's gone through obviously a lot of drama and stuff like that, but I'm a huge fan of his, and he's obviously far from perfect. And then also, I love listening to Joe Rogan. So that guy is just a talent. I'd love to have him on. He meets so many different people. He's got perspective on so many different things. And for a guy that was hosting Fear Factor and a B-list actor, he just, sold the rights to his podcast for $150 million. So I'd love to talk to him and learn a little bit about that.
Great answer. Awesome. Mo, anything yet?
Yes, my answer would be Frank Dana.
You want Frank Dana.
Yes.
Our
who
beloved
comes on this
director.
podcast. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll unpack that in a future episode. So,
I would have chose Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, or David Sedaris,
or someone who writes for a living. I don't know. Just
I want someone to write about me who knows me. So that's
what about me? What about me? I'm
I don't know. I think he writes better.
Sorry. Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, let's dive right in, guys.
It's a great way to jump into this love topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hard truths. They're part of love.
So Software has constantly learned and grown over time, right? We talk about it all the time, how much we've transformed. But I would say that sales is probably one of our most significant evolutions. Greg, we wanted you here today to help us dive into this topic. And if you don't mind, I'd love for you to help start us off by painting this picture. I want you to take us back in time. Let's get in the time machine together and share what sales was like when you first started in the role.
Happy to do so. I was just thinking about painting a picture, and I was thinking about all the famous artists that would hate to paint this picture because it was ugly. Look, when I joined Software 5 years ago now, I think to the day or to the week, and it's been a monumental shift for us, and we're always trying to get better. But I mean, we were a horrible sales group. We were individually focused on things. We weren't building relationships with clients to what we do now. It was an us against them mentality internally. There was a lot of selfishness. There was, I mean, I could go on, right? How long does this podcast go for? There was a lot of mistrust. I think I was talking to Mohammed about this not long ago. We didn't even know some people that were in the process of helping us put together proposals. We worked with two different offices. We office in Bangalore, office here, and we just had really poor relationships. We didn't focus on it. It was. If you look back on it now, it's kind of farcical what it was, and obviously, we're happy that we've addressed a lot of it, and we've got some areas to continue to improve on. But it's amazing that we were doing what we were doing and still making sales. And I think we were just lucky with our timing and the capabilities we had. We definitely weren't getting anywhere near out of what we should have with the sales group. And I know we'll probably touch on this a little bit later, but to do what we did was it's interesting that we achieved some of the sales that we did when we were so poor on many fronts, and relationships at the core just didn't exist, both with customers and even just internally. To put a bow on it,
I'll accelerate this conversation with what I think of when I think 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I was in the role of directing project management essentially, and so my group, when we thought of sales, we all let out like a collective grunt or sigh, just thinking about it, because what we were used to is receiving, we want a project, and we're like, great, good job, everyone's congratulating each other, and then they hand us like a 2-page sheet of paper with like a paragraph of what we should do and like a dollar sign and a signature on it, like, here it is. And literally we'd have to then construct post sale what this actually needed to be, and the price was set and we were already locked in. The first thing we had to do was call this client up and say, yeah, so we know nothing about what you guys do, but we know nothing about you, but let's start working together.
Classic handoff, right?
Some might think we're exaggerating that story. I think I can think of this project that was. So that's from my perspective of that time machine. Mohammed, Chris, you guys have any recollections?
Go ahead, Chris.
So coming in, I just remember there being this laundry list of proposals on the whiteboard, and Muhammad would come in. Have you followed up? Have you followed up? Have you followed up? Have you followed up? And everybody would have to like stand up and say whether they had followed up, how many times they had followed up, and whether the client had gotten back or if we knew what the decision was. And I just remember like, what is this? This is an interesting way, right? Like, because I joined right when we started to shift. But it was very much volumetric. And it was not an environment where you could talk about the relationship or other aspects of the sales process. It was just whether a proposal had gone out and how we followed up on it and did we get an answer. Right. So
it was also very number focused, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hitting goals, hitting quotas.
Very much a quantitative over quality focus, right, Mo? At that time, and it's kind of I was going to say, Jeff, like you bring up a good topic, right? It was I bring up the us against them, right? We were fostering a culture of unforgiveness. We weren't supporting each other. We were, handing a mess over the fence and then not doing anything to help our colleagues, and that built up over time. And there's a lot of resentment, and there was, here we go again. It didn't bode well for the things that we really wanted to do as a business, and it took us kind of some deep thinking to look into that to really get to how we would solve that. But I think every business has these types of issues, right? Whether it's a sales group that hands work over to a delivery group, if you're executing a project manager not being in the know and not set up for success, a product-based business out there, being disconnected to the marketing group or the sales group. And I think to bring that back to kind of our situation, there's always misalignment, but there's a lot more things people can be doing. And it really had an impact on not just kind of our level of sales, but our quality of sales. And again, came back to relationships. We really failed to connect everyone together. And most of the time that led to, us having to do a lot more cleanup. It led to not profitable projects. And it led to, one and done types of business and clients, which in the professional world or anyone that's relying on sales, bringing revenue in, that doesn't set you up for long-term success and growth if you've got one and done clients. And thankfully we've implemented a few things that have really changed things for us. But there's something to draw upon that type of story, I think, for anyone that's listening in. If you can't correct that, often you look at the ways of why it's a one and done client. You think about, well, we're not selling right, or, that's just the type of business we're in. Once you have relationships and you do a good job, generally more often than not, they become longer term or repeat clients. And looking back on that now, 5 years ago, it's very clear why we were in that situation of a long list of prospects and opportunities that Chris mentioned, and one and done projects.
Yeah. So we went through we're always transforming, but we went through a significant overhaul in how we approached sales. Chris, I know you helped lead that effort. Can you kind of set us up with what's changed, or what tangibly changed to address that picture that Greg's painted for us?
Yeah, no. So I strongly believe in the phrase that charity starts at home and then it spreads abroad. So when we started transforming our sales process, we had to start internally, which was fixing those things that Greg just listed, which was the alignment internally. Do we know each other? Do we know what we do? Right? Like sales didn't often know what delivery could do and what they were capable of. But yet people were estimating for things, not really understanding what was truly being estimated, and whether the client was going to get to their outcome. So by bringing in that internal alignment and then sitting down and going through a rethink of how we actually approach customers, right? So there is generally this notion in sales that you need to know your script, you need to have your capabilities deck, and you need to know how to handle objections. And all those things are somewhat true, but those don't actually help you really build a relationship with your customer. And when I say relationship, that's getting to know them individually. What are their professional ambitions? What are their personal likes and dislikes? Like, what are they drinking when you're in that meeting, right? All those small little things help you really understand what that customer is truly seeking, what they need versus what they want. And then taking that into a process where your teams are now understanding how to align, and then against that alignment, build better positioning where you can go in with a solution that will help address the client's needs and wants, as well as the overall business outcomes. And so us just rethinking our approach, and knowing that requires more time for sure. Right. It's not this like, oh, this is a more efficient way of selling. This is just a more human way of selling. Right. And, having the ability to work with customers more intimately during the process. So sales are done with a customer, with our approach now, not to a customer. So we're not just talking at people and hoping they buy and forcing them to sign on a dotted line, or coming back with these little salesy tactics that feel schmoozy and like a used car salesman. And that really helped transform the start of the relationship with the client and build that trust earlier in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of it was very process driven. And, just speaking vulnerably, I'm the one who was guilty for instituting all those processes in the sales department with, that was very volumetric centric, quantitative oriented. And it was all about process, like do this, do this, do this. And you follow this process and you lead to success. But what helped us with the transformation, and we're still transforming on, is that it starts with behaviors. It starts with the behaviors of, me as the one leading the organization, down to our salespeople, how we behave with each other internally and externally towards each other. And when we changed our focus onto the behaviors aspect and less on the process, that helped us start to be more human and work our relationships internally, human to human, and then beyond to our customers as well, instead of just being a process that drives the interaction and communication.
Yeah, I think Mohammed, you mentioned some stuff that just brings a few things up for me. Like when I first started at Software, it was very much about right? You're an individual, you're a bunch of individual sales folks, sales teams disconnected every other team, don't have strong enough relationship with clients. There's a lot of negatives. And then we kind of transitioned to more of a, we as a group. And I think we've made headway in we as a grand team, right? Not sales versus non-sales. But, when we put everyone together at Software and we bring the best of everyone, no matter if you're a project manager, you're the creative designer or director, or you're an account manager that has experience in a certain industry, what we deliver for customers today is very different compared to what we used to when we bring people together. So there's a component of inclusion, but there was a lot of steps we took to even get to that place. And we're not perfect. We're not there yet. I put my hand up and say I got a lot of room to improve on that. We've had those conversations about, the things that I've done that has harbored mistrust, or, I've not forgiven people for, when someone's let me down as part of the sales and things like that. But when we do overcome those things and have those conversations with folks, we do get to a point where what we deliver for clients is far greater than what we do when we're on our own. And I think there's a lesson to be learned in that. And if you're in those situations now, getting to those critical conversations to address them sooner rather than later, before they become big blow-ups or things that you can't repair, are going to be critical for people that are leading sales and marketing or groups in that area, or anyone really leading a group that has friction with other groups.
Yeah. And I think to that point, Greg, fissures on the team or that unforgiveness is actually visible and felt by clients, whether we like to admit it or not. Right. So I can recall times where we walked into a room and there was that clear division. And when it came time to Q&A, whether it was follow-up conversations and, one member of the buying team was talking to a separate member of the team, and, everybody's giving a different answer to the same question. And they're aligning on their end and saying like, well, the account manager told me this and the creative director told me that, like, which one, right? And it creates that very visible misalignment. And, when you are trying to get a deal that could be pretty sizable, 6 figures plus, those small things actually add up greatly from a customer end, right? Like, who wants to pay for work that's coming from a team that's already divided and we just started talking to them? Yeah. Like, what is the project going to look like? So it can be, pretty damaging to getting the buy-in, but also the trust of a client when your team has all of those feelings internally that are unresolved.
Yeah, Greg, I remember. So I remember when we used to sit down. I remember the room we were in. You and I would sit down. You leading the sales team and me leading the delivery, essentially, sitting down in a room to try to resolve these ridiculous kind of put out these fires of like clients being extremely unhappy. And I think you and I had a decent relationship, like personally, but like I remember the way we would have to talk to each other was it was like a bit of a battle of kind of like blame games and kind of like figuring out, well, you sold it this way, well, you guys could be doing this to fix it. Like, yeah. And it's really interesting because I contrast that today, and I get this real sense that the people working in a sales effort are very supportive. Like I never felt that back in the day. I feel really supported by sales. Like I feel like I'm being looked out for by people in sales. Where does that come from? How did that change?
It was an evolving thing. I think there was a realization that we were not doing well enough, and we had to look inside ourselves and accept feedback from other people that, the aim of the game in sales is to build relationships and connections, and we were terrible at doing it internally. If you're terrible at doing it internally, how do you do it out in the real world, right, with businesses and other people? And you're spot on, Jeff. I was going to say the word battle, right? There were so many times there where you and I were leading groups, and that probably reverberated back down the chain to our teams, and that's not healthy. We've come a long way, I think, where we've built up relationships. You've had to address the things we've had problems with each other, and that's still an ongoing process between different people, depending on where they're at in their own journeys and their own relationships. But I don't disagree with anything you said. It was problematic, to say the least. And I think one of the big changes that you can look to as someone wears a sales hat. I went through my own personal journey where I was thinking about why do people do these things to me, and why don't they care about me, and why are they impacting my stuff, and why can't they see that I'm trying to help Software get ahead and building business and new client relationships and things like that, and why can't they support our sales team? And I think I had many conversations with many folks, Chris, Mohammed, plenty of other directors at Software, and thinking about it from a me and an I perspective was not helpful. Thinking about, well, if I feel that way and people are maybe not supporting me, I guarantee you there's things I'm not doing on the flip side for them. And I wouldn't say I'm completely there yet, but as a sales leader or a leader of a team and things like that, you really do have to have a deep, hard look at yourself and realize what you're not doing. And I know through a number of our other podcasts, we've talked about reflection versus introspection, and it's easy to reflect. It's very hard to introspect. And I think one of the days, Mohammed and I, we had many, many conversations about this. Mohammed's feedback was like, you do it because it's the right thing, not because you expect a return out of it. And we were practicing a lot of servant leadership Software. And I think for the sales folks, when they realize that they want to do right by Software, they want to do right by their extended team members, by their whole team, they've got to get amongst it and do things themselves. And they've got to be part of the team. And I think you started to see a shift there. And that's problematic at times as well, where the boundaries maybe cross over a little bit, but to see what other people go through in a project or when you're selling and what they live through on a day-to-day basis, then you can start to actually have empathy for them and look at the crap they deal with and maybe some of the times that you set up for them. And when you start to look at that, I think that starts to trigger thoughts internally of what are you going to do to fix that, because you're responsible for it. And even when I think about that right now, I get kind of a fuzzy feelings. I'm like, man, that brings out emotions in me, and the things where I'm like, damn, that annoyed me, or damn, I really set that person up poorly, or damn, that project got screwed up because I did something bad. And it sucks to say it out loud, but I think that's where it stemmed from. That's how we started to make some changes with some good coaching and mentoring from people that have seen the pros and cons and gone through that. And Chris and Mohammed have Chris has brought different perspectives from outside in other relationships and working in his career. Mohammed's been open enough to kind of consider his own thoughts and mind around this as well, right? He's had to change. He's had to open up. He's had to rethink things. So it starts with yourself, right? You got to realize the stuff you don't do well, and got to realize how you're not really supporting other people. And if you want it, other people want it as well. Rather than worrying about yourself, worry about them. And good things come to people that do good things and care about people, is how I see it these days. That wasn't always the case back then.
Yeah, I think you answered my question, really just hit the nail on the head with the word empathy. When I was saying it seems like I feel supported nowadays by the sales team, you summed it up perfectly. It makes sense now. You guys just have a lot more empathy in your perspective. You really, I feel like you guys get more perspective of everybody's hardships and things, and you're there to help. It's actually great.
Yeah, and that translates into.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say that translates into the approach that you take with a client, right? Like that same supportive feeling that we have internally, when the client feels that, like that's where the trust is built, but that's also where the walls are let down, right? Like the perspective that I try and take into external conversations is, this is not us versus them. This is me trying to become a supportive member of their team, right? Like I'm trying to make sure the customer sees me not as a vendor, but as someone on their team that is there to try and make their world easier, their life better, right? And that is something that many sales leaders that I've seen in the past have not tried to get their teams to really understand, which is don't look at the customer as an outsider, as a, a versus. It's a plus, it's an and, it's a both. But if you walk in with that mindset, you actually will go in and ask the right questions, right? When you're going there to try and figure out how you help someone, you're not trying to just get to the deal as fast as possible or get, the deal as high as possible, right? You're really trying to understand, like, wait, what are you trying to do? And then when they say things that don't make sense or don't ladder back to that outcome, you feel more comfortable saying, like, so here's how I would approach it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I've learned, or here's what I've seen, right? You're more consultative, but you're coming from a place of I'm in your corner and I actually just want you to succeed. And if you don't choose me, it won't be because I, did not give my all or best advice. It could be other reasons, but you cannot say that, Software left you, and did not give you all of their best and, the greatest attention possible.
That's a really good point, Chris. Like, I know, Mohammed, you probably got a few examples yourself of where we probably had to deliver those hard messages to certain clients where it didn't really ladder up for us to keep going, and we had to be true to ourselves and work for them. But I mean, I know you've got a few stories to tell, right? So have you got one?
No, absolutely.
For it?
Yeah, we've had several customers that we've definitely tried to build a very strong relationship, and we successfully have done so. And it makes it easier to have those conversations around, this is what's best for you. This is what's best for your project. And we have to, we're able to have those courageous conversations with the customers to even say, hey, this is not something we are going to be able to help you with, or this is not something we're going to be able to support you with. Mm-hmm. And it comes from a place of empathy, and we don't want them to be, signing up with us for something that, they're not going to be able to achieve in terms of their outcomes. And we have to be able to walk away from sizable opportunities or sizable business prospects because it's the right thing to do, because we are not capable or ready to support a client in that instant or that particular project situation. And having empathy for what the customer is trying to accomplish and achieve, and our own team. And we have to make those tough calls, but we do so in a very supportive way. We try to always make the customer understand why we are not going to be able to support them and help them, but also try to guide them what they can do to still achieve their goals and outcomes.
Yeah, Mohammed, with what you talked about brings up an example where, we had to walk away from a client opportunity that was, 6 figures, potentially 7 figures and above, and potentially really juicy for software, right? And I remember, we did everything we could to try and make the deal work.
Yes.
And the client had typical type friction between a sales and marketing group and an IT group. And that was becoming very clear to us that would be a problem throughout the project. And I remember when we finally walked away from that deal after many months and a lot of hours, and as a sales leader or a salesperson, when you do that, that hurts, right? It really hurts to walk away from commission and knowing you're impacting sales goals and things like that. But I remember the power that situation had, and we didn't do it for this reason, but that really, I think, helped our relationship with internal stakeholders, even within software. And I saw when we went chased different types of deals and business after that situation, we were a lot more collected in our approach. We had each other's back. And it wasn't like we set out to show people that we've got their back at software if you're not in a sales group. It's just something we did because it was the right thing. And we wanted to protect our business, ourselves, the wider group. But that turned into camaraderie that we didn't have before that. And so that was, I think back, and I hadn't really reflected on that until now. And then I do remember kind of pursuing some stuff and working with the same people where it's probably the first time I thought, like, actually, these guys have got our back. And so I think, for anyone that's running a department or having friction between departments, if you run the sales group and your call center doesn't want to support you, or the operations group is not supporting you, there's probably things that you're not doing yourself to support them that you should be looking at first before playing blame games or thinking about how other people should be doing things for you. And I think that example we bring up, was probably a big change for us. It was probably one of the first times people saw that, right?
Yeah. And I also think customers who we have said no to, from opportunities haven't like disappeared. They've come back to us with second, third opportunities. There's, in fact, some customers we've turned down 2 or 3 times, and they've come back a 4th time. And then it perfectly aligns up with our specialties, our capabilities, and our desire to do work. And we've taken on projects, 3rd, 4th attempt. So even from a customer standpoint, they appreciate the honesty. They appreciate the transparency into why we are unable to take on their project, and also telling them what they need to hear. Like if we see it's an issue on their side, we generally have been very transparent and say, look, we see misalignment on your side. We see problems internally on your team. And, until you guys are aligned, it would not be fruitful to bring in a partner like us to support you, because it wouldn't get you the outcomes you need to achieve. This is what you really need to go solve these issues internally. And then we're happy to support you. So we've been able to do that and not necessarily piss off or disappoint the customer. Maybe we disappointed them, but ultimately they appreciated us.
But I would say that in certain situations, when we have those honest conversations, the client's like, well, can you help me get my team aligned? Right. And it turns into like, I can think of one specific example recently where, we are talking to a client and a customer who is trying to embark upon a transformation of their culture. But there's not a lot of alignment among leadership as well as with their global, teams. And we could have just said, you know what, like figure it out. And, we tried to sort of communicate that, but, they're like, well, can you come meet with us and talk to us about it so we can get them, engaged. Right. And it was a situation where we built that relationship with the most critical sort of stakeholders, the ones that are, our day to day. And they are now to a place where they don't like having meetings with their teams without soft weight in the room, not because we are the only ones that can speak to things and not because they don't know what to speak to, but because there's that level of trust, but also there is comfort in having a third party come and mitigate, the politics, the different perspectives, and, like having no sort of skin in the game, so to speak, to be able to just speak truth to all the powers in the room. And it turns into, when we talk about, love, it turns into a situation where the clients cannot see their lives or their projects without software in the mix, which, I would challenge every listener to think about, like, how many clients can say that about you and your business, right? If a customer cannot honestly say, I cannot do this without X company in the mix, there's a chance and an opportunity for you and your sales team, as well as the entire company, whoever's servicing that customer, to try and get to that place. And that does take relationships. That does take sacrifice. It takes compromise. It takes selflessness. It takes service. It takes listening and empathy. Right? It takes all of those things, because without it, like, I don't know where we would be with this one customer, because like whatever we say, even if it's just like, the sky is green and the ground is blue, they believe it, right? Like they just go with it and like, yep, from now on, that's going to be it. And that's not to say that we take our influence lightly. It's just that we know that influence is important.
We get asked a lot at this podcast. You say love is a business strategy, but how do you define love? What is love? Love is such a big thing. And we're like, yeah, it is a big thing. Chris, you just named the list. It's selflessness, it's honesty, it's serving others, it's empathy, it's being human with each other. It's all these things. And that's why, that approach is sometimes very novel for some people. And it's kind of scary to say, well, what do you mean love is a business strategy? Well, we picked a word that sums up everything you need. If you'd like the whole list, it would take a much longer title. And I don't think they allow that for podcasts. So it's love as a business strategy for a very good reason. And Greg, I want to tie this all together. I want to tie this back. I mean, we've been sprinkling in love there. We've been sprinkling all these sales, benefits and things like that. But what's the takeaway for the audience here, Greg? Like, tying it to love, what would you want them to take away in this lesson?
I think so. First of all, before I get into takeaway, I think it's important that everyone realizes that no matter if you're a salesperson or not, you're selling and influencing, whether it's inside your business or with clients. And relationships is key. And some of those things Chris mentioned are ultra important. And if you're not doing them, you need to start doing them. You need to ask yourself, as a leader, are you doing those things yourself? And if you're not, then you've got to start thinking how you're going to overcome that. If you have a team where you're seeing those things not happen, you need to start having crucial conversations with those folks to say, are we doing a good enough job? And the reality is most sales groups have got room to improve. As you nailed before, Jeff, you've got to be selfless. You've got to focus on relationships, and you've got to have empathy for others, right? Don't do it because you think there's a financial return for it if you're in sales. Do it because it's the right thing to do and you'd want it done for you. And when you do that and you take that approach to things, more often than not, you, your team, your department, your company will have more success.
Very nicely put. Mohammed, Chris, anything else to add in closing here?
I just echo what Greg said around, like, when you are not looking to serve yourself, I actually tell the sales teams, like, I realized that by serving everybody else, I was always taken care of from a commission perspective, from a support perspective, right? Like, I never had to worry about whether somebody would show up to my meeting. And I think that's always the fear of a salesperson is, what support am I going to get, especially if I'm putting myself out there with a new customer or a prospect or a returning customer. Like, is my team going to show up? Right? Like, it's like a fear in the back of your head, right? And when you are selfless, it does come back to you in more ways than one.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. Greg, a special thanks to you for joining. It was a really great conversation and a great trip down memory lane, if you will.
Some of those nightmares, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of PTSD going on, but that's cool.
It's been great. I love rehashing it too. Makes me think about probably where I'm at, where the team's at, what else we're going to do to keep getting better. Hats off to you, Jeff, for what you've been doing for the podcast. Been tuning in, a lot of valuable lessons.
Thank you. Yeah, and we're posting new episodes every Tuesday, and for the audience, if there's anything you'd like to hear us cover, if you have any feedback, valuable feedback for us, we'd love to hear it at softway.com/labs, LAABS. And if you liked what you heard today, please do leave us a review and subscribe on Apple and Spotify. It would mean a whole lot to us. And with that, I thank you guys again, and we will see everybody next week. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.